Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX141 Walsh, welcoming you to an all new World of Warships gameplay today on our channel. In this episode we'll be setting sail in our Colorado, the Tier VII American Battleship in a Tier VII domination game on the map Two Brothers. The focus of today's gameplay is going to be a continuation of our general theme for 2017 of how can one improve their capabilities as a battleship player, and I do indeed need to do so myself. Our topic of discussion here is going to be the concept of health management, a continuation in a way of our Kawachi video from a couple of months ago, link available in the top right corner of your screen as displayed now, whereby in that video we talked about tanking damage for the team. But this time we're going to go into a little bit more depth in terms of how one can use their heals effectively in order to be able to tank damage for their team. Knowing when to commit and push forward versus when to pull back and try to heal up what damage has been applied to your ship. Keeping in mind the general rule of thumb that high explosive and fire damage is much easier to heal, and you can heal more of it compared to damage taken from penetrating armour piercing shells. And hopefully throughout this game we're going to be effectively angling our armour, which can go from a minimum of 6mm, if I remember correctly, all the way up to just over 450mm, in order to try and maximise the amount of high explosive / fire damage we take and minimise those armour piercing penetrations. Now for those wondering, how do we have 5 repair consumables? Well, in short, we're using a combination of premium consumables, which gives you an extra one automatically, and on top of that the Tier 3 captain skill, Superintendent. As we make our way westwards towards Alpha, we should note on the minimap that there's only 3 of us going this way. Us, the Cleveland and the Ernst Gader, the Tier 6 German destroyer. Which means we do need to support our teammates, but we cannot afford to overextend, especially if the enemy team concentrates its overall attacking force through Alpha, will just be a sitting duck. And I say that because the Colorado is a large, easily detected battleship, whereby we can see the large profile, its detectability by sea is 16.2 km, and it's not the most manoeuvrable or the fastest. A top speed of 21 knots, and a manoeuvrability whereby it has a 16.1 second rudder shift and a 640 metre turn radius. And having been spotted already, the only information we can get from that is that there is a destroyer on the enemy team heading towards Alpha. But shortly, an enemy Cleveland is going to be spotted very briefly, and it's trying to head behind a landmass to support its team. Now we're keeping an eye on that Cleveland because we want to hopefully catch them full broadside and bring to bear the awesome firepower of our 4 twin 16-inch batteries. Meanwhile, when this Akatsuki appears, we decide to hold fire because we can see they are drifting into the path of one of our friendly's torpedoes. And therefore we don't want to waste our salvo, especially seeing as our Cleveland detonated the Akatsuki. And by holding fire and waiting for the opportune moment, we can see that Cleveland from earlier is completely ignorant to the fact that these 16-inch batteries are ready to fire. Okay, perhaps not the salvo that we're all looking for, we're hoping for at least 1 citadel, but just shy of 11,000 knocked off that cruiser early on means they've already lost a third of their health that they're never getting back. And here we assume that those are Akatsuki torpedoes based on the angle where they're coming from, so 10 km range, we need to turn in cut our speed. And throughout this game, keep an eye on the bottom left hand corner of your screen. You will see us change speed, whether it be a forward setting or a reverse setting, continuously. Reason being, we're trying to throw off the enemy's aim, and we're trying to make sure we don't overextend into the objective. But note, we're only a short distance behind our Cleveland and our destroyer. And here the enemy Iron Duke comes out full broadside, and we're going to punish them for it. An absolutely beautiful bit of dispersion there, 2 citadels knocking off 35,000 health. And for reference, a single citadel with the armour piercing on this ship deals 12,400 damage. But now here comes the problem. Having cut our speed and the Kirov miscalculates the initial lead, we're now going to become the target of a good number of enemy ships, starting with the Kirov, who we thought we could clip with another armour piercing salvo, but unfortunately we didn't take into account the fact they were accelerating, reacting to us targeting them. And they set us on fire in 2 locations, despite the fact we have the fire prevention skill active, i.e. the one that cuts the number of maximal fires on the ship and reduces the likelihood of fire by 10% if I remember correctly, the Tier 4 captain skill. But we note that seeing as we've only taken high explosive / fire damage so far, we can probably hold these fires back in terms of the damage they're dealing using a heal, so we put one on. And in the meantime open fire on the enemy Nuremberg. Our initial salvo away. It's a very lightly armoured cruiser, surely we'll tear it to pieces. Well, dispersion wasn't too kind, and we didn't provide adequate lead there. A little bit more lead, perhaps we would have clipped them with one shell. And with our repair being exhausted, we switched to our damage control party to put the fires out, because they still had a good amount of time to burn. And note here how we're starting to pull back, because the pressure is on us now, and we don't want to take too much damage. In the meantime, more high explosive comes in, and we open up with a second salvo on the Nuremberg, hoping this time that we're a little bit more fortunate and we provided the right lead. It's looking good. Well, we'll take a single citadel, that's half their health already gone. And we do take a significant salvo on our broadside there, a little bit of poor angling by us. And there's another fire. And we've got 40 seconds to our hill, we've got 40 seconds till the fire goes out, and we haven't got a fire extinguisher. But it's ideal not to use your fire extinguisher on a single fire unless you're on critical health. Reason being, you can out-heal a single fire when your heal is available, and also if you use your fire extinguisher that early and then another fire comes along, you're going to take a gratuitous amount of damage as a result. And here more shells come in, we take some more damage, we're down to almost our last fifth of health now. We've got a decent salvo on the enemy Iron Duke, but note how we're continuously reversing away at this point. And we're refocusing the enemy Kirov, hoping to clip them with a full salvo, just waiting for all the guns to be reloaded. We want to get them when they think they're at their most comfortable. And here we flip on another hill, having reloaded the consumable. But the Kirov player is smart. They're constantly changing up their overall velocity. And as a result, it means we miss another salvo. But we're keeping them under pressure. The difference being, of course, our reload is double theirs. We have the 30-second reload, and we do not have Adrenaline Rush for one of our Tier 2 captain skills. We went with Expert Marksman, i.e. the turret rotation one instead. And this Kirov is being an absolute nuisance, constantly harassing us with high explosive. But good on them, they're doing a good job. We've lost our Cleveland, so really it's us and our destroyer left here now. And we're going to be the main focus of the enemy team. But note how we can't really see anything at the moment. The only thing that is visible, very briefly, is the enemy Kirov, as they set us on fire again, and we're really bleeding health. We're going to try and clip them this time. We're noticing that they're starting to cut their reverse and starting to potentially go forward a little bit, or trying to get to a 0 speed setting. So we take a speculative salvo, hoping it's going to hit. We put out the fire that was burning, and we clip them with a penetration and 2 over penetrations. Roughly 5,000 damage by the looks of things. That'll put a little bit of fear into their heart, hopefully, as they continue to shill us. Now we could stop firing at this point, but the problem is it's very likely that the enemy destroyers are ahead of their smokescreen on Alpha and will keep us spotted regardless of whether we fire or not. So it doesn't really work to our advantage as such because of our very high detectability, either 16.2 kilometers as pointed out earlier. So here we'll just keep reversing and take a shot every once in a while. The Kirov being spotted again, we're really hoping to knock them out of the game, but we're watching their smokestacks now, we're picking up on their activity and aiming ahead because the smokestacks were changing direction to indicate they were now starting to go forward on their screen. And there we go, 2 over penetrations and a bounce, but at least we anticipated their directionality right. We're starting to pick up on our previous mistakes. In the meantime, we can see the Kamikaze is charging towards our friendly Nuremberg. We're keeping an eye on it, but we're expecting that the Nuremberg, being a cruiser with a high fire rate, will be able to tear the Kamikaze to pieces, as long as they're aware of the torpedoes. We could have opened fire there on the Kirov, but there would have been no value in doing so. We decide to hold fire on the Kamikaze because we saw our Nuremberg was going to wipe them out. And here the Kirov is starting to get cheeky once again and trying to manage their throttle accordingly to continuously get salvos off on us. They want us out the game. And we know they're going to start reversing to bring all of their guns to bear, so we anticipate an open fire, hoping to catch them amid-ship this time on the full broadside. Not a bad looking salvo. And they're out the game. 12,000 damage. Thank goodness for that. That blighter's out the way. But now we look towards Charlie, and what we note is it's being captured. Now we can see on the minimap the last thing spotted near Charlie was an enemy destroyer known as the Mass, the Tier 7 German destroyer. So we're just keeping our guns pointed that way. For the time being, we're just going to keep reversing as well, cutting our pace a little bit in our reverse. Reason being, we want to get a little bit behind our friendly Belfast, who can act as the screen for us, the very powerful British premium cruiser. And we take a speculative shot into the smoke to try and dissuade the Master from capturing Charlie, or at least sitting in their smoke. Pardon me. And whilst we miss, it seems to work because very shortly that mass is actually going to drift out to Charlie altogether. Or at least in the imminent future if I remember this replay correctly. And it seems to have had its effect. I made them leave the cap point. Alternatively, perhaps they just reversed out unintentionally, making a mistake. Regardless, another hill's available. We'll pop it very shortly. And in fact the smoke is now clearing, and yes, the muss has left the objective. We decide to pop the hill. We've only got one left after this, and we can see that we're going back up to roughly 2/5 of our health, i.e. 40%, and that enemy Cleveland is just in range, right on the edge of our 18.8 kilometre range. We're a little bit far back to get a decent salvo off, but we'll do our best to hit them, trying to accommodate for their speed and directionality. Our initial salvo misses, but providing a little bit more lead with our rear turrets. We picked up 2 penetrations, a third penetration and a ricochet. Unfortunately, the first 2 shells appear to have actually penetrated the torpedo belt and not the actual ship's armour itself. And now the enemy destroyer is headed back into Charlie. But a little bit of game sense here concerning detectability. We're trying to figure out where exactly that destroyer would be, just for our reference, so that way we don't get hit by any torpedoes or they can't rush us. Now our detectability of 16.2 kilometers is an issue because of course it means that we can get spotted out to extreme distances, particularly by enemy destroyers. But as we can see on the minimap, the enemy Farragut is pulling back and they will very shortly not be seeing us anymore. And as soon as they stop spotting us, we can tell where the muss is because we've got a landmass between us and essentially what is the northeastern portion of the objective, or the northern sector of the objective, which means the muss must be hanging up in that corner. And therefore, if we were playing with someone, we were hoping that the Belfast was going to charge in there and use their radar accordingly, but perhaps our Belfast teammate is not too confident in their ship's capabilities. If we were playing with someone, or alternatively, if we had used the chat, we could try and pinpoint the muss for our team, but we went by the assumption the Belfast would get in there, use their radar, and accordingly take them out. And the enemy destroyer is spotted, they started making their way southeastward. We open fire with a salvo, but we get caught out by the destroyer player cutting their acceleration completely at this point, as we can see. But it's a way of trying to say to them, hey look, there are battleships looking towards you, perhaps you want to leave the objective a little bit sooner. In the meantime, however, we note we've only got 1 hill left, and for those wondering why did we throw up our fighter aircraft whilst we were waiting for the muss to essentially capture Charlie, we're going to use this fighter aircraft in order to provide us with a little bit of scouting around our ship to see if there's any torpedoes incoming. Just an additional safety net. Not ideal, but perhaps it will sometimes work if the fighter covers the right area at the right time. But now we've got to confront the Iron Duke from earlier. You remember the one we citadeled twice at the start of the game. This guy's still in the game, he's been using his heels effectively, and is throwing high explosive our way. Now we've only got 20,000 health left, and this guy is constantly raining in the shells. We've also got our friendly destroyer just off of Alpha, and we can see that the muss is heading back in towards Charlie at this point, and we really want them out of the game because they'll become a problem if they're not dealt with. At the same time, we have to consider the Iron Duke is firing at us, but they're only firing high explosive. We angle towards them anyway, just in case they do fire some armour piercing. And we're taking the hits, losing our anti-aircraft batteries quite rapidly, but we can take the hits. With our opening salvo on their broadside as we present our broadside, we get 1 penetration and 2 overpins, 6,500 damage, not too bad, not what we wanted. We angle in towards them in case they switch to armour piercing, but it seems they're hell bent on firing high explosive, and only that throughout the course of this game. And with our last hill very shortly exhausted, we've now got to hold it together and make the most of what health we've got left. We've got no more resources to use. So we open fire at this time, waiting for them to come about, making sure we aim a little bit towards the front of the ship, and we're hoping to have our shells landing on the front turrets. And there we go. Another ship out the game. The fire's out as well, so we've still got 9,500 HP left, but we're still being detected by that pesky Farragut, or at least we'd assume it's that ship. Where could they be? Well, they were last spotted north of Alpha, but actually they're off to our western side, and they've already thrown torpedoes towards us. It's game over, folks. Or is it? Because we have a torpedo bulge, if we remember correctly, which absorbs 39% of the incoming damage if a torpedo hits it. And we were just fortunate enough to take the torpedo on the bulge and therefore be able to stay alive, and we didn't flood, quite fortunately. So here we try to finish off the Farragut. Our initial salvo misses, and this is where not having Adrenaline Rush, the Tier 2 Captain perk, means that we've got to wait a full 30 seconds to reload, which is unbearable, thinking to ourselves that this Farragut could torpedo us again for some reason if they're running the torpedo reload skill on their captain, for example. We're quite confident we'll reload before they can get a broadside off to fire their torpedoes if they're reloaded, which they have a rather long reload time if I remember correctly. So let's finish them off and end the game. A rather tough slog, but a victory in the end. We can see that our battle performance consisted of 107,980 HP of damage, whereby we scored 4 Citadel hits, 31 target hits, 1 incapacitation, 3 enemy ships destroyed, and a single secondary battery hit. And we also picked up the following 2 achievements. Dreadnought for receiving damage exceeding 120% of our ship's normal health pool from 4 or more enemy ships and survive the battle. And also Fireproof for receiving damage caused by fire that exceeds 40% of the ship's normal health pool and survive the battle. Looking at the team scores, we can see that we topped our team in terms of base experience earned, 1,668, whereby we're only a small margin above second place. And I would like to extend credit to our friendly Gator, whereby they did a brilliant job in working with us on Alpha. There's no overall communication, but they helped hold up the enemy team, especially knocking out that Akatsuki right at the start. And I get the feeling if they were not there, that flank would have crumbled, regardless of how well we personally did. And our overall role on that flank was to soak up the damage and be an ever-present threat to objectives Alpha and Charlie. Looking at our detailed report, we have one key item to note here, and that is the damage we received, a grand total of 94,402, or in other words 188% of our standard health pool. And if you look at the fires alone, I had that 26,388, that's just over 50% of our standard health pool. Or in other words, we exceeded the requirements of both the Fireproof and the Dreadnought achievements by a huge margin. And this goes to articulate how we effectively managed our health, managed our heals, and managed our position in relation to our foes, and how much damage we could take in order to stay alive and increase the durability of our ship and its presence throughout the match from the start to the end. And finally, coming on to our credits and experience earned, we can see that after additions and deductions, we walked away with 176,625 silver credits and 5,004 commander experience. To conclude, hopefully today we have demonstrated the importance of managing one's health when sailing in battleships. In particular, making sure you do not become that battleship which sails onto the front line and can only get off 1 or 2 hills before they eventually sink to the bottom of the deep blue sea. Instead, knowing when to push forward with your team and soak up the damage, and knowing when to pull back and use your heals to restore what health you've lost, and managing this over the course of the game can make a significant difference in terms of your overall durability throughout the match. And from the enemy's perspective, it can lead to a large amount of frustration, whereby your opponents will be thinking to themselves, hey, when is that ship ever going to die? I keep shooting at it and I do not get any decent results. And indeed, whilst your opponents are focusing on you, in turn, you can focus on them, and on top of that, your teammates can focus on them and fight back with no threat of return fire. And so I've been TX141, and if you have enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future World of Warships videos on my channel. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care and fair seas.